the more I think around what brand is and how people are kind of putting it out there, it's what is memorable, what is going to get, people to remember what you're doing, what your brand did, what your expertise is. And yeah, you can do that in person individually, but at the same time, if you kind of want to get out there and, do the whole brand play to kind of market, you need to kind of do something a bit different and be noticed. And are many brands doing that? I don't think so. And I'm kind of asking why, but maybe to your point, it's they don't have that expertise. They haven't done that before. They're just trying to survive as a cannabis business. Hello and welcome to the Lobsterpot podcast. It's just, well, I thought it was just me, but someone else is here. Who are you? Say your name again.
My name is Jamie. I'm 33 years old. I like long walks on the beach.
Hey, you're trying to date me or something, because, that's just not going to work, because, long walks, no, but beach, yeah, okay, cool. Anyway, fucking hell, man, where have you been all my life? I have missed you this past week in Berlin. You were doing something, well, rewarding yet fun, yet how did it go? Because tell us again what it was, because it was a nice little... Yeah.
A friend of mine did a charity bike ride across Europe to set a couple of world records and raise some money. So he got both records, at least unofficially. It has to be verified by Guinness World Records. For most countries cycle through in 12 hours and most countries cycle through in 24 hours, which was 5 and 8 respectively.
So which countries did he get?
So the countries were Italy, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Austria, Germany, France, Luxembourg, Belgium.
Ah, Luxembourg, hey? So were you there for the announcement that cannabis is now essentially recreationally legal in Luxembourg?
Unfortunately, it was 4 a.m. I was operating purely on adrenaline alone, so I didn't see. It wasn't a super, cannabis friendly environment at that time of day. But I'm aware that it is just kind of rolled in now.
Yeah, I mean, it's mad. So I think what I want to talk about today, I mean, we don't have a guest, but we have lots of observations. We have lots of things that we've seen in the past year, things that have been going on. I've just come back from Berlin. We were in Lift in Toronto not that long ago. Cannabis Europe. I mean, there are lots of shows, aren't there? And, you can't go to all of them. As nice as it would be to travel the world in the name of cannabis and, go to all the shows and meet, we all have to pick and choose because, and this is something no one kind of explicitly said when I was in Berlin, but it certainly felt like that, things are really freaking tough right now. And we've certainly noticed that in terms of, well, what do you think? I mean, what have you kind of noticed? What have you kind of learned over I can give my thoughts as well. Sort of the last few months, the last few shows that we've been to. What's the kind of general feel? Because we've been to London, we've been to Barcelona, we've been to Toronto, and I've been to Berlin in this year thus far. And I don't know. It's what's your take on what you've seen so far?
I think there's like differing levels of excitement and hype around lots of different things. So there's the kind of macro play. There's the what will Germany do? What will Europe do? Will the US federally legalize? The kind of conversations and questions that are almost on loop, and they 2 steps forward, 1 step back is kind of what it feels like over time. But then you get new people into the industry, like we were a couple of years ago. You get those at every show. There's new people who have nothing but excitement and hype for what's to come and what's possible, because they haven't necessarily been ground down by it yet. It's kind of what it feels like a little bit.
No, totally. I do concur. And certainly felt like that in Berlin. There was a lot of new people, it felt, and people new to the show, to ICBC coming along, and sort of there was a lot of enthusiasm. But I got to be honest and say, it wasn't, I don't know if it felt as well attended. It wasn't in as much of a buzz, particularly around the expo this year. No, I don't think that's not the fault of anyone per se. I just think it's a reflection of the industry. I mean, there were a lot of the usual suspects. There were a lot of, there were a lot of vape brands, actually. A lot of people from North America and from other countries really trying to sort of, it felt like, explore what the opportunities are going to be. Because I don't think it's clear to a lot of people. I think a lot of people will be like, okay, well, there's an opportunity in Europe, in, certain countries, particularly Germany. Again, that's a whole other topic, which we can touch on. But, you felt a case of like, well, and I was speaking to a few people, and I'm like, well, we're not quite sure what the regulations are actually going to be. I mean, some people have an innate logic, others are like, well, there's people from all over here. At some point, things are going to be accessible, the products we're selling, or that, you know, but at the same time, it's like, you know, there's a real, it's just shitloads of uncertainty. And I think that feels that there's a certain anxiety that goes with that. And I feel like that's kind of working across the board. And it's like, well, what needs to change in order to get people spending on marketing again? You know, I mean, I'm always slightly, I want to say hesitant. It's always interesting when you go to shows to see, you know, what's the biggest stand, who's doing what, you know. I'm not saying it's like it's a pissing contest, but it does feel sometimes like, well, is this huge stand going to make the same impact as this tiny stand over here? Or is this tiny stand, is anyone going to notice it? Is it, you know, going to work? What's the kind of, and it makes me think, well, is this the most effective way for a lot of brands, you know, B2B and B2C, direct to consumer as well? Is that the right play moving forward? What else needs to happen? I think maybe it comes from the fact that a lot of people are like, well, how can we market this? What can we do in these countries? How can we do things online? Maybe we just need to go out there and put products in people's hands, which I totally get. But it feels like, and correct me, I don't know, tell me what you think as well, Jamie. People are doing what they think's right without really knowing if it is. And when you're looking at marketing budgets in a kind of really tough economy, that doesn't necessarily feel like the best thing to do. I mean, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, essentially, that's the feeling I get, rightly or wrongly.
I think that it's a fair point. I think conversely, if you are a marketer or if you're a business in cannabis and you are not sure and it does feel risky, you're probably going to go for the safest bet, which is super traditional event-based marketing, where you have a stand and you have a team and you go and maybe you sponsor an event, or maybe you get involved with something that's going on at the show or an after event. The traditional ways of doing event marketing, I think that people fall back on it because it is safe in a time of uncertainty. That's maybe what it feels like. There is the other side where there are a lot of people who are involved in cannabis who are in cannabis because they love cannabis, almost all people really. And a lot of the time that means that they aren't experts in other things, or they haven't come from really well-established other industries. And that's fine too. But that often means that they go for what they think is the right play because they don't know any better.
No, absolutely, 100%. And I think, again, as I always kind of say to people when they come on the podcast, I think there's a lot of really passionate, dedicated, driven people with a lot of expertise. And, you know, just some of the people I met who were just like so knowledgeable about the plant and how to operate, you know, everything from the regulatory side of things to lab testing to compliance to all of those necessary moving parts to kind of get the industry, you know, moving in different parts of the world and sharing that expertise. So again, to your point around, you know, what's the safest bet? Yeah, go to where people are and meet people. And I feel like absolutely that's what's happening. But yeah, it just feels like sometimes when you see a lot of kind of brands, you know, it could be software, it could be kind of machinery or something like that. It's like there's such an opportunity here to do something above and beyond, because it feels like a lot of the time, perhaps some of these sort of products and services are sort of saturating the market because there's a lot of software providers now, a lot of seed to sale stuff, a lot of, you know, how to, you know, organize, how to manage. And it's interesting, but it's like, how do you differentiate all of them? I don't know. And, you know, what can brands do to really stand out? And if you're going to spend a lot of time and money and effort going to these shows, you know, makes sense to kind of go above and beyond a little bit to find new ways to kind of get people's attention in person and, you know, when you come back as well. And it's that sort of follow-up aspect that I think's interesting. It's like because yeah, it's kind of that aspect of it, but at the same time, it's, you know, the more I think around what brand is and how people are kind of putting it out there, it's what is memorable, what is going to get, you know, people to remember what you're doing, what your brand did, what your expertise is. And yeah, you can do that in person individually, but at the same time, if you kind of want to get out there and, you know, do the whole brand play to kind of market, you need to kind of do something a bit different and be noticed. And are many brands doing that? I don't think so. And I'm kind of asking why, But maybe to your point, it's they don't have that expertise. They haven't done that before. They just trying to survive as a cannabis business this side of the pond or elsewhere. That's the impression I get a little bit. Maybe that's my projection a bit, but
I think there's a level of projection there. I know that you naturally, as a marketer and as a person, want to push boundaries. That's very much in your character.
Yes.
But I think you are right that a lot of people don't. Now, if I speak to it from the other side, where I think a lot of businesses don't want to just be out there, if that makes sense. They want to be seen as professional. And I think a lot of the time, maybe they feel like by doing things very differently, by being standout, by being not even quirky, like in the way that our brand is, for instance. But I think people almost want to be status quo. That feels like the right thing to do, to fit in and then to excel within the kind of framework that already exists. But in terms of attention, there was a really good example. We went to MJ BizCon last year. And there were some chaps walking around with, I can't remember what the exact thing that it said on the shirt was, wasn't it? Like, you know,
buy weed from white mouse.
Buy weed from white men. Now, utter bunch of dickheads, but equally the sheer amount of attention they got for that, for something so incendiary, because it stands out and because it garners attention. It's the power of fame within brand, and in that case is infamy. But they probably there would have been people who were, I suppose, more pro that particular message, who probably really aligned with that and probably really did appreciate that.
But it's almost like saying any publicity is good publicity. And I kind of agree with that to an extent. But again, when it comes back to positioning your brand, like who you are, who you serve, who you're trying to reach, the sort of audience you're trying to attract, you know, I mean,
it's a very polarized example, but it is. Of all the shows we've been to, that's the most memorable thing I've seen, was the amount of attention that garnered, negative attention, and rightly so. But it did gain an enormous amount of traction for, you know, a reasonably small brand, just from one photo of some people walking around a show. Like that's quite powerful. And I think that when you talk about standing out and everyone has a regular stand and everyone's in, you know, the regular company polo, it's very middle of the road, and people do that partly because they don't know how to stand out, partly because I don't think they want to.
No, 100%. And I think there's standing out in the right way, and standing out in the right way has to be tied back to your business objectives. What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to achieve it with? What pain points are you trying to solve for that audience? So, you know, where something like that. And again, I can go back to Berlin and say all of the stuff that seemed to be kicking off there with the Lamborghini, with the kind of juicy, with the, you know, I don't want to pass judgment on that. But again, when you see stuff like that happening, it garners attention. What does it garner attention of? And, you know, it was a sort of people going, oh my God, I can't believe this still exists. This is still going. And at the same time, it's like, well, it just kind of reiterates that something is still happening, and, you know, it's not positive necessarily. So, you know, in the similar vein, it's like, well, what do you want to be known for? And, you know, how is that going to translate into something tangible for your business? You know, is walking around with, hey, buy weed from white douchebag men, is that going to be, you know, is that going to endear anyone? Absolutely not. You know, I don't know to what extent there's a kind of right-wing kind of, you know, fascist kind of cannabis militia of you know, white supremacists.
There will be groups of people who that resonates with, and you know, for better or for worse, mostly for worse.
Yes,
but there will be people out there who that resonates with. And when you talk about niching down and finding your customers, if your brand is built on the beliefs like that, and those are the people you want to attract, then if you get that much attention from doing that, then you are going to attract those people. Now, it's a bad example in so much as it's a bad message and a bad way of operating, but it's a perfect example of how effective really powerful targeted messaging and brand can be.
Yes.
In that if you did that, I don't know what, you know, we're going to try and riff on some brand or some campaign ideas right now, but if you could somehow garner the attention that a Juicy Fields Lambo got like last year, more so than this year, and you could do that for your brand, that would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it?
It would, but again, it depends on, well, I think
Well,
there's
let's
a few
assume that
things.
it's
No.
positive.
Let's assume that it's positive. And if you had an infinite amount of, but do you know what? I'll tell you something. That when I was at ICBC Barcelona last year, 2022, it was really a case of, oh my, for me, it was like, it's like a 60-year-old white man with untold amounts of cash just been given. What will get people's attention? Oh, women in short skirts and Lamborghinis. It felt like a weird misogynistic play, and it was a bit odd. I didn't really expect that.
It's like old school B2B marketing. That is
This is like
marketing.
booth babes, dolly birds, and fucking fast cars. It's just it's distasteful in the weirdest way, and I didn't really understand what the point of that was, other than to show off.
Yeah, well, that in their particular case, it is, because that's just all about awareness and eyeballs, isn't it?
Yeah, but is that, again, knowing what we know now about how the thing has shaken out, it's a case of, well, fuck, actually, like you say, that probably was the right sort of thing for them. They thought anyway, what do you want to do? Make a big freaking noise. They made a big noise. They made a big splash. They were everywhere. They did the whole thing. They kind of brought whatever party it was. It was a strange one, and it was one that I think was kind of easy to get caught up in, but it was.
But I mean, like, I'll take a good example of a positive one, and one that I know works. Is someone like iSpire. They sponsored that rooftop bar event that we went to last year. I don't know if you went this year, but
I did.
I mean,
it was good.
That's a perfect example. You're like, okay, so after the show or before the show, but at an event, you bring people around to try your product, to have a good time, to be in a safe space, to consume with other professionals. It's a really great example of creating an event and a moment that you can be a part of with other people, and remember that it was the iSpire party. That's something that you can do, and that's not going to get quite as much attention as a big bold incendiary t-shirt or a overpriced sports car, but that's the kind of example of supporting an industry and a community, and placing your brand in the way that you actually should be, in the way that it wants to be as a company.
100%. And I think, again, what they do really well is that, even though they might be more of a consumer brand, they know full well iSpire, and, hats off to Luna and everyone, because they tirelessly advocate for cannabis as much as they do their products. They have that authenticity built in. They know that even though these people, they might be involved at the party, or kind of B2B kind of customers, they're still very much part of that. They are the ones who are going to buy it, and they're the ones who are going to kind of be those first mover advantage you want, the ones who are going to be using it, going, fuck, this is amazing. And certainly saw a lot of that. And that is, like you say, a really, really smart way of kind of owning the narrative by dictating it and saying, this is how we do things. This is how we do it, isn't it? It's a Montel Jordan, not Montel Williams, although he's very much implicated in the industry. That's a whole other story. But yeah, 100%. This is the fun. It's the kind of that element that brings people together and unites them and gives them an experience. And that's what, again, the most successful shows, they provide that wider experience. It certainly feels like.
It's also really important to think about how young the legal cannabis industry is, in many places at least, and that as cannabis becomes more acceptable in a legal way and in a destigmatized way, the people that are going to be pushing ideas and introducing people to new things are the people who are in the industry right now. So if you have a group, if you have a room full of 400 professionals, those are the people who are going to be speaking to their parents or their friends or their brothers or their sisters, or in 20 years their kids, whatever it is. Those are the people that are going to inform more broadly kind of society about what to do with cannabis. And if they have a favorite dab rig, or if they have a favorite grinder, that those are the products that will get pushed.
Yeah. Speaking of grinders, I'm just going to give a shout out to my main man, Jürgen Bickel, who gave me an industrial sized grinder. And, it's a freebie from the stand, but, I took that to heart, Jürgen. And, anytime you want to come on the podcast, you are welcome, my friend. You are welcome, Herr Bickel. So on that note, but yeah, I think, again, a successful brand like Stores and Bickel, everybody knows them. They have global reach. And what do they do at the shows? They tirelessly just demonstrate the volcano, and it is a spectacle. That's the sort of thing. It's those spectacles that really. Another brand that I saw, in Berlin who were doing something interesting. I think there was so it's a band called Huber, and I think there was a kind of group of companies, including I think AJ Glass that Becca Allen Tap works for. They were kind of had this whole sort of bar thing set up, and they were kind of partnered together. And together, all of these different brands kind of created this experience. And in that, they had kind of like, you can try these different cocktails that they have on their stand. I'm like, it's 10 a.m., but I'll have a sip. But again, it's that kind of thing, and that kind of creates, they're selling kind of products that look like something, it looks like GCSE science on steroids. I can't confess to being a science brain and understanding the ins and outs of what it is, how it works. But at the same time, what I got from that is this is an area, where people can congregate. This is where I'm get that experience, this kind of weird sciencey kind of cannabis stuff. And oh, look, I can have a drink as well. And it's like, yeah, that's actually really cool. And, I got a lot of respect for that. And that's the sort of thing it's that thinking, that kind of coming together to provide, information in an entertaining way. It has to appeal to the thinking and the feeling. That's the stuff that really seems to resonate a lot in the absence of having a really kind of strong when I say strong consumer brand, we're talking like, the ones that we see every day, the Nikes, the Pepsis, the Colas, all of that stuff. And so you can't compete with that. You don't need to compete with that, but you need to know what your audience expectations kind of should be from a show, and then to really kind of lean into that and say, well, let's provide the best experience ever, as much as we can in the budget we have in this environment. And I honestly think brands could take it out of those environments. We don't need to be at show. Why not go onto the street? I don't know. I'm not sure. There seems to be more. Actually, one of the things, I was going to mention this. One of the things I was thinking about is that also from a kind of brand marketing business perspective overall, you have a lot of people coming from the US and Canada that have got very, very well established markets. A lot of people from Colorado, a lot of people from Canada, sort of had some good chats. And it's a very different thing, their kind of experience of the cannabis industry versus what it is here in the UK and other countries. And, a lot more people it's almost like the sort of European side of things is like, how do we do this? The kind of North American side of things, we've done this, we can help you do this. And there's almost like, okay, well, let's see how we can do this together. And it's almost like one's not established enough, the other one's too well established. And there's a kind of gap a little bit to sort of fill in.
Yeah, I would say that I think there's obviously a misconception about where Europe is for a lot of North Americans. I think that's the biggest thing I've noticed. When you're in North America, there's either oh, you guys have got legal this, legal that, and it's no, we don't. Or it's, so have you guys got anything yet? And it's like, well, we do have some stuff, but it's not really that well known, broadly across Europe, only in the industry. And I think that one of the problems that those brands are facing is that they've built brands in very particular areas. So if you built within Canadian legalization, or if you built within state legalization, that's very, very different to building out a brand across multiple countries, across the whole of Europe. That's a very different prospect for them. I guess that's very different again when we're talking about B2B versus B2C. And a lot of the businesses that we've worked with, or a lot of the businesses that we meet at shows that are serving businesses, are looking more broadly internationally because it's easier for them, because it is easier to kind of translate their message in that space than it is in a consumer environment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, again, it feels like, you get one country, you have access to potentially a whole roster of others when they come in. So it becomes scalable. And maybe it feels like in the US and Canada, US state by state things open up. But again, is that scalable? Well, it's tricky. What do you do if you're a, multi-state operator? You're essentially licensing your brand to others, or setting up a whole new operation, which again, ultimately it feels like everyone's doing the best they can with the restrictions, with the shit sandwich that governments around the world. This is not just a diss governments, although, having a healthy contempt for authority is never a bad thing, in my opinion. I'm not going to quiz you on that. But at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, we're all trying to do the best we can, but it's like, how do we share the love? How do we share the knowledge? And, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of people talking on the panels are great. People are talking about what's it like here, what's it like there. And I guess you don't necessarily, as a kind of we talk to a lot of people from different places, but then that's our part of our reason of being, to understand the global cannabis sector as best we can and advocate for it in the best way as an enterprise. So I guess a lot of people don't have the opportunity to see people or talk to people from other countries necessarily, unless they're doing business directly with them. So that knowledge sharing bit is still very vital, but it feels like panels are great and everything, people talking, we've done some ourselves, but sometimes it feels like, is this a PR opportunity or is this actually knowledge sharing? And I think sometimes that's again, you'll go to any industry and you'll get that kind of sense of, are you just talking about how fucking great you think you are, or are you actually providing something valuable, or are you doing both?
I think in the case of the talks that I find most interesting personally are either the ones from advocates or from politicians, because that's something that is quite hard to get a really good window into. Very often the business ones, if you're invited on a panel, it's mostly to promote yourself, really. That's the kind of purpose of it. So I think discussions happen a lot more around politics. There was a really good one at Cannabis Europa between MEPs, MPs, police commissioner. And that was really interesting because that's the really nitty gritty. And that's kind of this fusion of politics and industry and culture and societal impact. And that I think is a place where knowledge sharing is probably easier to get across. Whereas when it's kind of drier business to business stuff, maybe those are conversations you want to have one-on-one with someone and ask them questions rather than be in a panel.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. But I think, again, going back to the one we saw at Cannabis Europa, it was really interesting. I think for us, the whole idea of decriminalization, what that means from different perspectives, was something that really resonated. I think we talked about it with both of us, this idea that, it challenged our thinking, and that decriminalization to us, two white men in their 30s, might it gives us license to, we're possession, doesn't matter, we can't get busted. To other people, to perhaps someone of color who comes from a working class background in London, the idea, and this is what Belle Ribera-Addy said to us, that gives you potentially, sets people along the wrong path. And if there is, you're going to be stigmatized in the same way the plant is for being, you've got a criminal record. Then what option do you have? I can't get a job, I've got this record, so I just continue down that path. And that was really eye-opening, I think, wasn't it, for both of us? I remember us having this we've had this conversation numerous times, but again, it's that wider understanding of what it means to be involved in this industry goes beyond the business side of things, and it goes beyond almost the cultural side of things. There is a huge cannabis culture, not just the kind of the kind of ganja Bob Marley kind of kind of neon skull bong type kind of the kind of hackney stuff, but then what people are doing, how people are using it, what they're using it for, and what it means if what the legality as the relationship between what's legal and what's available, and that kind of interplay. That's that kind of gray area that becomes an interesting sandbox. And I think a lot of brands, it feels like a lot of brands are kind of leaning more into that nebulous area. And I think that's an interesting one to explore. It's not just it's not what can we get away with. It's like what politicians saying, what's legal, what's regulatory compliant, and what do people want? Do you know what I mean? And if you can kind of bridge that gap as a company and lead into, we understand, or we're trying to find out. I don't think you need to have the answers as a brand. I think you just need to be, we have this, we see the relevance of it. We want to understand more about what you're doing, consumer, or, business consumer, or business to consumer, to whatever the hell. But again, it's about understanding that community and understanding the landscape as well. And I think that's probably where more brands could be leaning into.
No, I think that's definitely the case. Speaking to the kind of classic ganja Bob Marley aesthetic, I think it's quite a strange thing that it still manages to be so effective. But I think that ties very much into wider opinions on cannabis, and that is the assumed aesthetic. And I think that's a lot of brands that are trying to elevate cannabis in the way that it's consumed, and create a wider market where it's not just your classic stoner demographics consuming the majority of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real challenge, but also a real opportunity and quite an exciting thing. You know, the idea that you can bring people into the space to consume cannabis in different ways, not to smoke flower, not that there's anything wrong with that, but to enjoy it in different ways, be it beverage, be it edible, whatever it is.
Oh man, that's, you know, I say it time and again, but if we had beverages and edibles here, you know, actually, you know, THC infused, they would just fly off the shelves. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind this would be, and I don't think it would be a kind of an initial enthusiasm. I mean, there would be, but I think there's longevity in that. I mean, again, just my opinion, but at the same time, it's like, well, we've seen it firsthand in Canada. We've seen what's possible. We've seen what it looks like when people can have nice things, you know, and do you know what? It doesn't hurt anyone.
I think it's a funny thing. I think the real, for me anyway, the real issue with edibles and beverages is time release. You don't want to take something that does something an hour and a half later. And that's why I think it's one of the reasons that smoking is still very, very popular, because it's pretty much immediate and it allows you to meter consumption much more effectively. So as we see new products be developed, be they vapes or be they some kind of dispensers, whatever it is,
true,
that allow people to measure out and deliver a particular amount and know what that's going to be, that is, to me, is a bit of a game changer, because you know how much food you can eat, you know how much booze roughly you can drink to have a rough effect sometimes. And with cannabis, you never really know. THC percentage isn't a particularly good metric, as we know. Terpenes, their impact on things isn't really very well known, despite what a lot of people might tell you. And the way that everything works together and works with your individual ECS is even less well known, to the point that it might as well not even be a thing, because it's such a black hole of kind of.
But again, this comes back to the need for research, the need for it to be taken seriously scientifically, especially if it's going to be taken seriously medically. And again, there's always that disparity between, hey, this is saving people's lives. This is, you know, helping people genuinely, you know, as a product, as cannabis in various forms. And then you've got the whole, hey, this is, you know, let's just go and get stoned and, you know, have some fun. And I still feel like that spectrum is so vast. Yeah. It's like, how do you almost kind of do the same thing? I mean, yeah, you can put forward the argument, oh, cannabis is therapeutic, and therefore, you know, anything, whether it be fun or, you know, genuine healing. But, you know, there are certain dials that have more, there are certain instances rather, where, yeah, saving lives is more important, obviously, than getting high. But at the same time, it's like, how and this is one of the biggest things for me, and there's no answer. I think it's like, how do you reconcile the two? How do you reconcile, you know, and we talk about Trojan horses, like if you get medical legal, then that's just going to lead to recreational. And the hope is, well, for someone, you know, probably for us and a lot of others, that's the big hope. But at the same time, it's like, for other people, it's like, no, I just want access to medical cannabis because this makes me feel better. And, you know, I've spoken to people, you know, it's life-changing for some, you know, it's so weird in that respect. And there's no answer, but I think at the same time, it's a case of, well, we just have to keep exploring what the impact of cannabis is, so many different ways, societally, culturally, kind of medically, and, you know, commercially as well. But what's clear to me as a kind of final thought from me, and I'll ask you for yours in a sec, is, you know, there still needs to be a lot more clarity where possible in terms of, you know, what people are advocating for, where they feel the industry is going, and, you know, what all of these different products, services, machines, pieces of software are kind of doing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what, you know, where is this going, and how can we provide that clarity?
I think that you're absolutely right. I think that it goes, for me, even deeper, perhaps. So that education with the industry is one thing, but you have people who already are in the bubble and who already understand it. I think it's having conversations with people who have no interest or are outwardly against cannabis. Just building awareness and and over time it will become more accepted and more acceptable. Over time it just will. And the only way to do that is by every individual involved having a conversation, chatting to your taxi driver, chatting to your barber, you know, chatting to your parents, whatever, whoever it is, and just having a conversation and seeing it from their perspective, and really figuring out what some of the, and we know what a lot of the, I guess, hesitations around use are, and some of them are justified and some of them aren't. But the only way that you can dispel or engage with them is by engaging with them, and not pretending that people who are against it are wrong. That's just their opinion.
No.
It's as valuable and as valueless as yours, and that's fine. So you kind of have to recognize that not everyone is going to love cannabis.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
But that doesn't stop them from making an informed judgment call on why they don't like it. And I think, like you say, that's the important mission here. And it starts with the community of people involved in the cannabis industry. And it's on everyone, I feel. We're all advocating in our own ways, not within that vacuum, but in that wider world, and sort of saying, actually, this is happening. This is something that people want. And this is what, you know, how do we do that? How can we inform people? So it is that information. It is that kind of, and I think brands have a real stake in doing that, and I think they should. And yeah, that's my final thought. Cool, man. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been quite an interesting conversation. I hope other people find this conversation interesting. And if they want to come and talk to us, then please do. We are more than happy to just shoot the shit about whatever topic related to cannabis you want. So give us a call. Boom. All right. I'll catch you in a bit, sir. Thank you.
Lovely speaking to you, Dave. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, man. Bye.